I smelled the finger before I felt it brush against my hair. Harold carried a stench about him that no amount of cheap body spray could tame, but he preferred that over a bath. I pushed the dirty sausage away from my face and spat, doing my best not to think about the chip dust I could taste on my lips. "Harold, what are you doing in my cabin? I'm sleeping, in case you didn't notice." Harold ignored my protests and put his hand on his head. It was the signal for speaking out of character. "Morgan, all cabins are in character spaces this weekend, remember? I am not Harold. I'm Roderick the White, champion of the 9 great maiden kingdoms." I cut him off, not giving him the satisfaction of announcing his titles. I rolled over and pulled my phone off the charger to check the time. A faint white light filled the room as I unlocked the screen. I was met with a text message I had gotten a few hours ago from my sister, Jenna. "I'm so sorry I got called into work. I know you already swore it, but please, please, please make sure the Orc King gets the peace treaty and gift of peace. You know how hard we have all worked for this. Love you. I am flattered that a lady of your beauty can recall my name, Lilias, but you must keep your voice down. You know the Iron Alchemists have it out for you." I turned to see the oaf staring at me with hunger in his eyes. I pulled the blankets up around my chest a little tighter. "What is that magical device you have?" "Harold, stop with the game. It's almost midnight. I want to go back to bed." "Who is this Harold you speak of? I came here with a message for Lilias. It is my understanding she wishes to have an audience with the Orc King, and I am to escort her." He tapped defiantly on the foam sword at his side. I slid my face into my hands and let out a loud sigh. I picked up my phone again to check the game's schedule. I was certain our meeting with the Orc King wasn't until tomorrow morning. "I can't help but notice you are trying to access the town board with that magical device. I have been told a creature from another dimension hit a wizard tower and disabled all magical communication in our realm." I stared at Harold until he put his hand on his head and leaned in close to me. "A logging truck hit the cell phone tower up the road." "You're kidding me. I wish that it was a jest, dear Lilias, but it's true. You and the Mages Guild have negotiated a peace treaty with the Orcs, correct? You need to present him with the terms, and he is ready to receive you. I can't imagine the consequences for you and your allies if you were to stand him up." A sly smile crawled across Harold's lips. It would be my ass if I messed this up for the Mages Guild. I closed my eyes and thought of the sleep that was almost mine, then slipped into character. "Please leave my chambers, Roderick, as I prepare for the journey. I, Lilias, mistress of the Mages Guild, will travel with you to meet the Orc King." "Wonderful! Oh, my honor! No harm shall come to you." "You may leave, Roderick. I need to slip into my enchanted dress." "I must protest. The alchemists could attack at any moment." Harold bent down and finished his thought with a whisper in my ear. "I should keep an eye on you and a hand on my sword." He stopped and inhaled deeply at the base of my neck. "Especially while you're so vulnerable." I struggled not to gag as his smell and the insinuation crept over me like a spider crawling across my skin. I stood up and tried to push the giant away from me as a shiver ran down my spine. The wall of flesh barely moved, though. My delicate arms were no match for his great frame. "Absolutely not, Harold. If we are going to do this mod, you will leave while I change. Where are the other game runners anyways? You know it's against the rules to be alone with a player as a member of staff." Harold's hand shot to his head, and he stuttered out an explanation. I knew he was on thin ice with the other game runners. Conduct warning after conduct warning. He always seemed to worm his way out of any consequences for overstepping the boundaries of female players. As Harold stumbled out of the cabin, I made sure to lock the door behind him. I thought about the promise I had made to my sister. The two of us found this game as kids. We played to escape another giant. Harold was just as smelly, though not as cruel. The other giant lorded over the halls of our home with a thunderous voice and heavy hand. Jenna used to talk all the time about magic. I think she really believed it could save us. As kids, anyway, the reality of an abusive parent had long killed that fantasy. It wasn't a surprise to me, though, that she had founded the Mages Guild. It was real enough in the game, and her magic had saved her friends more than once. I pulled my boots on and began tying the lace that ran up the sides of them. Jenna had spent months lobbying for this meeting. I couldn't let her down. Everything in me told me not to, but I slipped my costume on and went out the door. The heavy humidity of the night made it feel as if we were wading through a swamp. I had to stop and adjust my dress several times, as my sweat worked with the gravity and the rocky terrain to pull it lower and lower around my shoulders. I may not have even noticed if not for Harold's breathing, getting heavier each time it fell.
We must be getting close to the neutral ground, Roderick. Where is the meeting to be held?
I asked this as I realized we were on the outskirts of the camp where we played our game. I was beginning to wish I had listened to the voice that told me to postpone the meeting.
Yes, Lilias, it is just ahead.
Harold pointed with his foam sword to a large cabin. I squinted and noticed the silhouettes of players mulling about inside. Their shadows danced in the flicker of a single lantern hung in the rafters. I breathed a sigh of relief knowing that I was at least within earshot of someone other than Harold.
How are we going to play this? Should I just present the terms of the Mages Guild?
I believe that should suffice. I am your envoy and will ensure no harm comes to you.
I reached into the bag I carried at my side and pulled out the peace treaty. I smiled as I looked over my sister's hard work. She had spent hours handwriting all the terms onto some parchment she had found. The scrolls looked like something off a movie set. I also checked to make sure I still had the gift of peace. It was customary among the orcs to present a weapon with a proposal of peace. We had found the old decorative dagger at a thrift store. It was still pretty sharp, so we had to get permission to use it as a prop, as long as it stayed in the gold-plated scabbard.
Give me a moment to ready some spells, just in case this goes sideways,
I said, as I began to cast magical armor on both of us.
I don't want to get caught flat-footed, and I only have one teleport.
The game used small yellow beanbags to represent spells. I always carried several on me. I hit myself and Harold with a few of them, and then put them back into my pocket. The two of us approached the cabin, and I knocked on the door with a dignified confidence. Two players I recognized as regular stick jockeys from Monster Camp answered and ushered us in. Both had green makeup lazily thrown upon their faces, and they wore tattered furs over their tank tops and gym shorts. Each of them had a giant club slung over their shoulder.
I come here representing the Mages Guild. I am Lilias, the Enchantress, and I am accompanied by Roderick the White, Knight of the Nine Maidens.
Even though I disliked Harold, I knew his name carried some weight in the game, and I had no qualms about using it to my advantage here.
We have come here to present a treaty to the Orc King. We ask for peace between our factions and aid in our upcoming battle with the alchemists. The Orc King would like to accept the terms.
The stick jockey I recognized as Brad said.
Yeah, he asked us to accept the terms on his behalf. Your honor?
The other player I knew as Kevin added, as he looked at Harold for confirmation. I couldn't help but let the disappointment show on my face as I put my hand to my head and pulled Harold to one side of the cabin.
Harold, what is this? The Orc King isn't even here. I was looking forward to negotiating this deal. Well, we had to run with a skeleton crew since it's so late, and they were the only two still at Monster Camp we could send out as NPCs.
I looked over at the two of them. Brad had the end of his club placed against his crotch, and he was thrusting while Kevin cheered him on.
I wouldn't exactly say they are the deep political intrigue type. These guys are fighters, not storytellers. Why couldn't we have just waited until tomorrow?
Well, it had to be tonight.
Why? I'm going to talk to the directors and see if we can retcon this whole thing. I really feel like you flubbed this dude.
I didn't. You don't understand. It's better this way. I'm protecting you.
Protecting me from what?
I watched in confusion as Harold moved towards a closet inside the cabin. He went to the closet and then came back several times. His movements were erratic, like a squirrel that couldn't decide if it should cross the road or not.
Harold, are you all right?
I asked him. His face twisted into what seemed like 100 different facial expressions in just a few seconds.
I have to protect you, Lilias. If you are cast into the void once more, you can't come back.
He wasn't wrong. If my character died again, she would be permanently dead in the game. I would have to make a new one and start all over.
Harold, that's fine,
I told him as he paced back and forth.
It's part of the game.
Look,
why don't we just all go to bed and we'll figure this out tomorrow?
I'm not Harold,
he yelled as he started slapping himself in the face.
I am Roderick, and I will protect you, Lilias.
Harold, what's going on? I think you need some help. Why don't we go to the med cabin?
Harold stopped at the edge of the closet and lingered there for a moment. He stood there resolute, like a soldier that had just been given orders.
The Orc King plans to betray you, Lilias.
Harold stepped into the darkness and returned with a long piece of metal that reflected light from the lantern above. He dragged the tip of the blade across the wooden floor, and my stomach turned to knots.
Hey bro, what the fuck? This isn't part of the mod.
Brad stared at Harold in disbelief, and there was a slight quiver in his voice.
Is that a real fucking sword? Quiet, Orc, or I shall have your head on a platter.
Harold barked at him.
Dude, this isn't okay. I'm going to the director's cabin.
Kevin marched towards the door as he spoke.
You can't pull a sword on someone and...
His voice cut off as Harold plunged the sword deep into his chest. I screamed as Kevin struggled to pull the blade from his body. Harold sneered and twisted the sword before pulling it out and leaving Kevin in a bloody mess on the floor. Brad ran to my side, putting himself between me and Harold. Kevin tried to crawl towards us as he took shallow, rapid breaths. A foamy trail of blood and green makeup followed him.
Did you think I was lying, Orc?
Harold reached down and grabbed Kevin by a tuft of his hair.
I suppose I will have to show you that I am a man of my word. My spies have told me all about the trap you planned for the Lady Enchanter here.
Brad and I watched in silent horror as Harold lifted the sword high above his head and brought it down upon the nape of Kevin's neck. The blade was dull, and the impact caused bits of flesh to fall upon the floor. Kevin reached out a hand towards us, and I could see that he was mouthing the words, "Help me," though he could not speak. Brad grabbed my head and buried it deep into his chest.
Don't look, Morgan. You don't need to see that,
he said with a whimper. I heard several more thuds as Harold worked his way through flesh and bone. All I could think of was my grandpa's farm, where he would split wood. I wanted so badly to open my eyes and be there instead of this nightmare.
Well,
Harold said between heavy breaths,
the only good Orc is a dead Orc. My commander used to tell me that back on the front lines of the First Great War.
The man turned to the corner where Brad and I had taken refuge.
Unhand her this instant, you foul beast.
Harold pointed the sword at Brad.
Lilias, fetch me some ale.
Brad squeezed me tight at Harold's command, but I pulled away from him and gave a reassuring nod.
It's okay,
I whispered.
We don't know what he'll do.
I spent years ushering Jenna into another room or turning on the TV to drown out yelling. I knew how to keep calm.
Where is the ale, Roderick?
I asked, trying to hide the fear in my voice.
In my pack there by the door.
Harold fell into a wooden chair, still winded from his attack. I went to the canvas bag and rummaged around until I found a bottle of soda that had a handmade label that said ale glued to the sides of it. I took the wooden cup that was inside too and went to Harold.
Here you are, Sir Roderick,
I said, as I poured the green liquid with trembling hands.
Thank you, dear. Have a seat, won't you?
Harold pointed to the chair that was across from him at the small table. I looked at Brad briefly, but his gaze held no answers for me. The chair creaked as I pulled it out and sat in front of Harold. I wiped my eyes, doing my best to hide the tears.
You there, mongrel,
Harold shouted at Brad.
Cover your kin. The sight of him is upsetting the mistress.
Fury and fear waltzed across Brad's eyes. He went to where Kevin's body was laid on the floor and took a blanket from one of the bunk beds scattered in the room. He knelt down and covered his friend's body. The shape under the cloth was unnatural, with the head so far removed. The foam club Kevin carried sat alone on the floor, just a few feet away. The innocence of the toy was a distant memory now. I was no longer in a game. Harold leaned forward, and the chair groaned under his weight. He was spilling over the sides of it.
Do you remember the First Great War, Lilias?
He asked, as he reached into the satchel he carried at his side.
Yes, I do.
Harold's weapon stared at me from across the table. The white flecks of bone stood out against the red smeared all over it.
We met during the Great War, at the battle for the Dwarven stronghold. I must confess, Lilias, I fell in love with you there.
Harold produced a letter sealed with wax.
And when my spies recovered this letter, I knew what had to be done.
Listen, Harold,
The giant slammed his fist down hard on the table.
I am Roderick,
he yelled, as his spit landed on my face.
You will address me as such. Is that understood?
Before I could answer, he hit the table several more times.
Is that understood? Answer me.
The man's voice was a clap of thunder.
Yes, Roderick.
I could feel the tears running down my face, but I smiled at him.
What was in the letter?
Harold pulled a small knife from the sheath at his side and broke the seal on the envelope. He was breathing heavily after his outburst. Brad and I exchanged a knowing glance as he stabbed the blade into the table and then tossed the letter at me.
See for yourself. I'm not wrong for killing that orc.
I peered over the letter using the lantern light from above. The room was silent except for the cicadas outside as I read over the text. It was orders directly from the Orc King. He had planned to seize me during our meeting and then offer me to the Iron Alchemists to gain their favor. Once delivered to the Alchemists, I was to be killed. I finished reading, and Harold's sweaty face met mine.
Now do you see? He asked. I couldn't live without you. I had to intervene, so I coordinated this little rendezvous here tonight.
I was starting to piece together the meaning of all this. Harold was on the Game Master's team, so he must have known this was coming for my character. I was certain he'd set this all up without the other game runners knowing.
Roderick, thank you for your service,
I said with survival heavy on my mind.
The Mages Guild owes you a great debt, no doubt.
Harold smiled and leaned back in his chair. He folded his hands and rested them upon his belly, content with my answer.
A debt I hope we can settle quickly.
His eyes gleamed and my stomach turned.
An alliance between the Mages Guild and the 9 great maiden kingdoms would be unstoppable.
I watched Kevin start easing his way towards us from the shadows of the cabin. He stared at the knife set into the table. He motioned for me to continue as Harold was focused on our roleplay.
And what did you have in mind, Roderick?
I leaned forward and allowed my dress to fall just a bit, exposing the top of my chest. I needed to keep Harold's attention.
A marriage,
he said, with his eyes locked onto the cleavage pouring out of my dress.
I would take you as my bride, Lilias.
You would have me, Sir Roderick.
I reached to grab his hands across the table. His thick fingers were covered with sweat, but I held them as tight as I could.
I would, dear Lilias.
His heart beat rapidly. I could feel it through his palms. Kevin was inches behind Harold now. I watched as he held one finger and then 2. On 3, I pulled Harold towards me as hard as I could, gripping his hands with all the strength I had. Kevin grabbed the knife in an instant and plunged it deep into Harold's back. The giant howled out in pain and was on his feet. My shackles broke as if they were made of paper.
I should have killed you, orc,
he yelled, as Kevin tried to pull the blade from its sheath of flesh and muscle. Harold pushed him to the floor and grabbed his sword. Kevin was a great athlete and light on his feet, but he was no match for Harold's overwhelming size. Harold lifted the sword high above his head and brought it crashing down. The steel connected with Kevin's forearm just as he brought it up to protect his face. The blade met bone with a sickening crack, and Kevin screamed.
Please stop! Please don't hurt me! I don't want to die!
Kevin scooted himself across the floor with his good arm while the mangled one hung above his head.
We can work this out!
We are beyond that, orc,
Harold said, as he lifted his weapon into the air again.
You will join that other orc in the void.
Before Harold could bring the sword down, an idea hit me.
I cast a teleport,
I said, as I threw one of my yellow spell packets at Kevin. The beanbag hit him in the head, and he looked at me dumbfounded. Harold turned to face me, and he wore a similar expression, but his was layered in anger.
Why would you do that, Lilias? He roared.
Where did you send him?
I sent him to the castle dungeon, I said, trying to point Kevin towards the door without Harold noticing.
We will need a witness to the Orc King's crimes after all. To, convince the Mages Guild to ally themselves with the 9 maiden kingdoms.
Harold squinted his eyes at me, and then turned to where Kevin was still sobbing on the floor.
Perhaps you are right, but it seems your spell didn't work.
With Harold's back to me, I began miming the out-of-character motion at Kevin. He finally got my message and placed his hand on his head.
Oh, it was just delayed,
I said, as Kevin backed away from us like a hostage that had just been released. His arm hung limp at his side.
Must be that wizard's tower that got knocked down.
Harold rubbed at his chin.
Perhaps it is.
I sent him straight to the dungeon, so there's no way he could get any help from the other orcs.
I drew out the word help as Kevin slipped out the door.
Yes, I know.
Harold waved a hand at me, clearly irritated.
We need to make our marriage official, but before we do, get this knife out of my back. It's a good thing you gave me that magical armor.
He took a seat at the table again. The hilt of the blade stuck out just above his right shoulder. A normal person could have easily reached the weapon, but Harold was not a flexible man. I took the piece of metal in hand and thought about using it, but even with the jump on Harold, I didn't think I could do enough damage to prevent him from killing me. The knife was only a couple of inches long. I would need to stall until Kevin got back. I yanked the knife out carelessly, and Harold winced. A small trail of blood fell down his back.
Cast a greater healing spell,
Harold instructed. My heart sank. A greater healing spell would use all my mana in the game. I wouldn't be able to use any more magic.
I think a minor one would work,
I said, as I reached for another spell packet.
If you are to be my bride,
Harold said through clenched teeth,
you will not question me.
His voice was a whisper, but it sent fear straight to my bones.
A greater healing as you wish, Roderick.
I muttered the in-game incantation and dabbed at the wound with my spell packet.
There you are. You're all set.
Thank you, Lady Mistress.
Harold rolled his shoulder and then extended his arm and took the knife from me. I was astounded as the wound opened and closed with each movement, but it was like he didn't even feel it.
You do good work. Please join me.
I sat at the table, and he produced more documents from his bag.
I took the liberty of securing a marriage license for the two of us. I was hopeful you would accept my offer. You do accept.
Harold peered at me over the top of a piece of parchment.
Sir Roderick,
I said in a high-pitched voice.
I took you for a gentleman. Is that any way to ask a lady for her hand in marriage?
I had to keep Harold busy for as long as I could.
Well, no. You know that I am a gentleman, Mistress Lilias.
Harold was flustered.
And no ring,
I said, as I turned my nose up at him. I caught sight of Brad's body in the corner and bile rose in my throat. Maybe I was still in bed in my cabin. How could any of this be real?
Of course I got a ring.
Harold pulled a golden circle from his pocket. The stone set upon it dazzled when it hit the light of the lantern. He offered it to me as he struggled to get on one knee.
Lady Lilias,
he said,
first enchantress and mistress of the Mages Guild, will you vow to serve me, Roderick the White, champion of the 9 great maiden kingdoms, until your dying day, and take my hand in marriage?
Yes,
I gagged at the words.
I will be your wife.
Harold leapt to his feet with a grace I didn't know he had and slid the ring onto my finger.
A kiss,
he said, as he puckered his lips at me. I pulled away, but then saw the sword he carried, still wet with blood.
Just one,
I said, sobbing. Harold's lips met mine, and the saltiness made me want to vomit.
Happy tears, my darling.
Harold's voice was low as he went in for another kiss.
I can't say I blame you. I've waited for this day a long time.
Harold kissed me several more times, and I felt like I was watching it from above my body. I no longer felt his touch or his oily lips against mine. Spectator and performer in a production I wanted no part of. Survival was the only goal. Harold gave me a moment of reprieve and fumbled with the papers sitting on the table.
You need to sign these, dear,
Harold said, handing me a feathered quill.
We must make it official. I had the magistrate at the castle draw these up.
I watched myself sign the papers. My body no longer seemed under my control.
How lucky am I
said, through an eyeliner-stained smile.
Lady Luck favours us both today, my dear bride.
Harold boomed as he knocked back the rest of the soda in the wooden cup.
You know what we must do now.
Plan a ceremony. We have many decisions to make,
I said, as I took the quill and sat at the table. Kevin had to have gotten some help by now. All I needed was a few more minutes.
Fetch me some parchment, will you? I'll write all this down.
Oh, no,
Harold said, as he took the quill gently from my hand. He stared at me for a moment, and then pushed my hair back before he went down and whispered into my ear. Each word felt like a bullet piercing my soul.
We must consummate the marriage.
I felt the warm, wet worm of his tongue trace the outline of my earlobe, and I shuddered.
Roderick, please.
The tears fell like rain from a cloud.
You don't have to do this.
Don't worry,
he said as he took my hand.
I am a generous lover.
Harold reached up and put the lantern out.
We can't,
I pleaded.
I don't want to.
The hand landed on my face like a meteor crashing across the sky. Stars seemed to dance around my head. My cheek began to ache and throb, and blood poured out of my nose. Harold put a vice around my wrist and pulled me to one of the beds.
You will do as you're told. Do you understand?
He shook me violently as he spoke. I was like a doll in his hands.
You are my wife now. Mine. You belong to me.
The scenes were all a blur as I struggled to keep my vision.
Yes, Roderick.
I somehow let the words fall out of my swollen lips. Harold tossed me onto the bed and I groaned out in pain. My mind raced as I tried to remember the rules of the game. I needed a way out of this. Harold's pungent body odor filled the room as he pulled off his boots. The oaf stumbled around in the moonlight that poured in from the windows. I remembered the bag I carried at my side. My hand went inside it, searching for a scroll or magical item that might buy me some time. A paralyzed potion, or maybe a freeze tonic. I usually carried that sort of thing with me when I was adventuring. To my surprise, I found the hilt of a dagger, the gift of peace for the Orc King. I felt a small tinge of relief fall over me and whispered a thank you to my sister. Harold loomed over me just a few feet away. His massive frame seemed to grow in the shadows as he wrestled his cloak and tunic off. My heart raced. I only had one shot at this. I pulled the dagger from its scabbard and laid it just underneath my lower back, keeping my hand on the handle.
Roderick, what's taking so long?
I asked, adding sweetness to my voice to disguise the fear.
I'm on my way, my love,
he grunted, as his leather belt hit the floor. He glided towards me like a ghost. I was disgusted by the joy in his eyes. The springs under us creaked as he straddled the mattress on top of me. Harold's warm breath and drool fell onto my face.
I promise you will enjoy this.
He giggled and pecked me on the cheek. If my plan was going to work, I knew I had to go on the offensive.
Not as much as you,
I said, in the sultriest voice I could muster. I reached up and began kissing him on the neck. I could taste the acne and sweat that gathered there. With my free hand, I reached into his greasy hair and pulled his head further to the side.
Oh, not too rough,
he whimpered, his throat fully exposed. I pulled the dagger from underneath my back, camouflaging my movements with moans. Just as he started to pull away, I stabbed the knife deep into his Adam's apple. He jolted and tried to reach for the knife, but when he did, I ripped the dagger across his throat with all the strength I could muster. A waterfall of red cascaded down upon me, and I couldn't help but smile.
You fucking pig!
I yelled, as he slumped off of me onto the floor. Harold reached for the faucet that leaked out of his throat, trying to stop the flow, no doubt, but I was on him before he could.
Fuck you, you fat fucking bastard.
I hurled a different insult with each hole I made in his chest.
You can't hurt me, motherfucker.
I stabbed and ripped until all that was before me was a soup of entrails and flesh. I backed away and fell against the wall, spitting on Harold's body. My breathing was heavy and I felt lightheaded. The last thing I remember was red and blue lights outside the cabin window.
Are you sure you want to do this?
My sister asked me as she peeked into the window.
It's been 2 years, Jenna,
I told her, with my hand on top of my head.
I'm not letting him take this from me. Put that goofy keychain away too. It'll get in the way of the fight.
Jenna laughed and slipped the gaudy ball of keys into her pocket. The metal ring held the key to our new apartment, another giant slain. Tears pooled at the edge of Jenna's eyes, and she wrapped me up in a hug.
Oh, careful!
I winced, pulling my arm away.
It's still fresh.
I motioned towards the new ink on my arm. A knight's shield was there, along with the banner that held the name, Kevin.
I'm so proud of you,
she said, holding my hands.
Let's do this.
The two of us breached the door of the cabin. Inside was a small army of orcs led by the Orc King. Brad was among them, and he smiled at me.
I am Lilius the Unbreakable,
I shouted at them.
Mistress of the Mages Guild, champion of the Emerald Kingdom, and I have come for my revenge.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to click subscribe and check out some more stories here.